The Palk Bay is the area between the Palk Strait and the Adams Bridge, forming part of the historic waters of India and Sri Lanka. For generations, fishermen shared these historic waters peacefully using traditional gear. But during Sri Lanka's civil war, its northern coast fell silent and Indian bottom trawlers moved in, damaging marine habitats. When Sri Lankan fishermen returned after the war, they found their traditional fishing grounds depleted and occupied. Despite a clear maritime boundary, Indian trawlers still cross over. Sri Lanka has banned trawling and detains those who violate the line. What began as shared livelihood waters has turned into a conflict of survival between communities, economies, and a sea that is running out of life.
The Palk Bay is this small water body between India and Sri Lanka, and it has been the scene of a major long-standing fisheries conflict. The fishermen have a long history of fishing together amicably in the Palk Bay. The border itself, maritime border, comes up in 1974. Before that, there was no border. After the border was drawn also, it continued. So till 1983, it was business as usual and there was no problem. The fishermen continued to fish on across the bay as before. But 83, the civil war started in Sri Lanka with disastrous consequence for the Sri Lankan fishermen, and very soon after they were stopped fishing. They were not able to fish because a war was taking place in their territory. So for long spells, fishermen could not fish. They were allowed very little near shore fishing. They could go and drop their net, come back home and then go and pick it up in the morning. But it was politically impossible to restrict the Indian fishermen. So they continued to fish. Finding the vacuum on the Sri Lankan side, they expanded their operations significantly on the Sri Lankan sides. The historical process of mechanization in India had already gained strength from small boats to bigger trawlers, all that started affecting the Palk Bay. So 83 to till the end of the war in 2009, the Indian fishermen had a fairly free run of the Palk Bay. So 2009 the war ended, and since then it has been a very intense conflict between the two fisher groups.
பொறுத்தவளவிலே இந்த இந்திய இழுவை படகுகள், அதுவும் இரட்டை இழுவைமடி படகுகள், நான் நினைக்கின்றேன் உலகத்திலே தடை செய்யப்பட்ட ஒரு தொழில்முறையை அந்த தமிழ்நாட்டில் இருக்கிற மீனவர்கள் இலங்கை கடற்பரப்புக்குள் வந்து தொழில் புரிவதனால் வடமாகாணம், கிளிநொச்சி, முல்லைத்தீவு, மன்னார், யாழ்ப்பாண மாவட்ட சிறு மீனவர்களுடைய வாழ்வாதாரமும் அளிக்கப்படுகிறது. அவர்களுடைய தொழில் உபகரணங்களும் அள்ளி செல்லப்படுகிறது. கடல் வளங்கள், அதாவது சூழலும் அளிக்கப்படுகிறது. கண்டல் தாவரங்கள், பவள பாறைகள் அனைத்தும் அளிக்கப்பட்டு சிறு மீன்கள் முழுக்க பிடிக்கப்பட்டு எங்களுடைய எதிர்கால சந்ததியினரே கடற்தொழிலாளர்களாக, சிறு தொழிலாளர்களாக வாழ முடியாத ஒரு துப்பாக்கிய நிலைக்கு 2009ஆம் ஆண்டு யுத்தம் முடிவிட்டதிலிருந்து இன்று வரைக்கும் மிகப்பெரிய பாதிப்பை நாங்கள் எதிர்கொண்டு வருகின்றோம். என்றால் நாங்கள் யூரோப்பா, ஆப்பிரிக்கா, லத்தீன் அமெரிக்கா, ஏசியா என்று நாங்கள் இன்று ஒன்றுபட்டு ஒரு ஹோல்ல ஒரு மேடையில இருந்து சகோதரத்துவத்தோடு இதை கலைக்கின்றோம்.
A fisherman's lifetime savings which are put into assets in terms of nets can be destroyed in one night when the trawlers come and rip through the gill nets. The trawlers in most places come 3 times a week because of an agreement between small scale fishers and trawlers on the Indian side. The trawlers come on Monday, Wednesday and Saturday evenings. So now for many years, our fishers avoid going to the sea on those days. Though in some parts they're also coming every day of the week. So which means half their livelihood is gone because they are not able to fish on those days. Then there is the environmental damage, and we haven't done, I think, a proper assessment of it. of possibly the depleting fish stock, and so there's also that kind of a damage. But in 2016, for the first time, not just secretary level, but ministerial level, both foreign ministers of the country and both fisheries ministers of the country, they had negotiations in Delhi, and for the first time we had an MOU which put forward a vision of how to move forward. And in subsequent years, we saw a decline in the number of trawlers that were coming. There was attempts to phase out trawling and so on. When there was a change of government in 2019, this agreement was even forgotten, this MOU. Nobody even, when I spoke to people in the government, they were not willing to listen. They didn't even know this. And then with the COVID crisis, large number of trawlers started to come to our sea. Our Navy also did not arrest them because of the fear of the spread of COVID. And now, we are almost back to square one with large number of trawlers again coming to the sea. The kind of decommissioning of the trawlers, that I think, as Vivek mentioned, that initiative has also failed for the most part. Fisher-to-fisher talks, government-to-government talks. Depending on the moment, there are different openings. We have also tried to see if we can get the Tamil political leadership or Tamil civil society leadership in the north to try to convey this message to the Tamil Nadu leadership. So given this huge asymmetry of power, we felt that the engagement has to be multi-pronged. There's no one approach. It's not just fisher to fisher. It's not just bilateral.
The science in Palk Bay is so far absent. We don't know in terms of data. We don't have data that what's happened to the resources. We have anecdotal information basically. Now, if we want to move away from trawler, are there any technical solution that can catch the same resources probably at a comparative level of efficiency to support the livelihood of the people?
Fishermen of Northern Sri Lanka use very modest gear, very basic gear, but the bottom trawlers, as you have all heard, is, two giant vessels with destructive net virtually scooping out all resources from the ocean bed. So again, asymmetry of resources, then asymmetry of respective political influence. One primary challenge has been, the narrative around this conflict. This evil Sri Lankan Navy versus innocent fishermen from Tamil Nadu is the framing that is offered for consumption in Tamil Nadu. If you speak to fishermen on the Sri Lankan side, the narrative, I think, which is less heard, less visible, but very compelling, is that, look, we are a community that has emerged out of a 30-year brutal civil war. So many fishermen were killed during the course of the war, as many Tamil civilians died. So many fisher families were displaced from their coastal villages that were controlled at different points by either the Tamil militant group or by the Sri Lankan Navy that was guarding it. So this is a community that only after 2009, when the war ended, came back to their respective villages and are trying to rebuild their livelihoods from scratch. Putting in all the money they have, buying small boats, modest fishing gear, nets and so on, just hoping that, the civil war is over, we are back in our villages trying to rebuild our homes. Maybe we'll have access to sea, make a living, support our family. This is not a very ambitious ask on the part of fishermen on this side, right? But this is the narrative that very rarely gets captured, that side. Framing this issue as, just about border transgressions by Indians or by Indian fishermen, they are saying bottom trawling is the problem.
So, for last few years, there are protests from the fishermen groups all around India to reduce the impact of trawling. And even there are a committee set up by the Ministry of Fisheries to look into the issues and suggest ways on how to kind of control the trawling in India.
So I think one of the major reason for this conflict is the bottom trawling, the destructive gears. So, not that we don't have laws banning destructive gears in India, but the implementation is never been done, and we have been fighting till date to implement this, the law to ban destructive gears. But what can I? How do we solve this issue is a complex thing. So all this kind of destructive gears, I think, is detrimental for every fishers across the globe. So we have to come together to ban these destructive gears, and yes, and if we can, if ICSF can facilitate this engagement within the Tamil and the Sri Lankan fishers, and then vice versa, if we can restart the dialogue, meeting Sri Lankan government and the Indian government, I think somewhere or another there'll be some pressure from both sides to our government to kind of act.
We have to get researchers to put forward the environmental damage. So that has been one strategy. Yes, it's a legal issue. There is a maritime boundary which is being crossed. Yes, it's a foreign relations issue. It can be framed as an issue of security. The Navy is to guard the borders, and that becomes an important deterrent. Only when there are arrests of these boats, that then there is some pressure on the trawlers. At the same time, it is also an issue that is political, possibly ideological, in terms of trying to create a different thinking on the Tamil Nadu side. So we need to, it is such an intractable problem that we need to work at all these levels.
NFSF resolves that the governments of India and Sri Lanka must sit together to ensure that to protect the rich ecosystem and fish resources of Palk Bay and Gulf of Mannar, which benefit both Sri Lanka and India and provide livelihood to thousands of fishers of the two countries, India should respect the ban on bottom trawling declared by Sri Lanka and come up with a matching ban on bottom trawling in general and for the Indian side of Palk Bay and Gulf of Mannar in particular. That Palk Bay and Gulf of Mannar be declared as a small-scale fisheries reserve to be administered by the SSF communities on both sides of the bay or the Gulf, facilitated by the governments of both countries. That the provisions under Section 3 of Article 73 of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, are respected, and that in no case the fishers of one country are subjected to firing, imprisonment, or corporal punishment. They should see to it that the fishers of one country trespassing into another are returned to their country of origin as early as possible. That the impounded fishing equipments and boats with personal belongings should be returned to their countries of origin in undamaged state at the earliest.
இந்த பிரச்சனையையும் அப்படி தீர்க்க முடியும் என்ற நம்பிக்கை எங்களுக்கு இருக்கின்றது. அதற்கு குறிப்பாக தமிழ்நாட்டிலே இருக்கின்ற அன்னளவான 2500 இழுவை மடிகளையும் அந்த முறையற்ற தொழிலையும் நாங்கள் எதிர்க்கின்றோம். ஆனால் வடக்கு மீனவ சமூகத்தை பொறுத்தளவிலே எந்த ஒரு பகுதியிலும் யாருடைய உயிர்களோ அல்லது பாதிக்கப்படுவதை அல்லது வன்முறையை ஒருபோதும் நாங்கள் விரும்பவும் மாட்டோம், நாங்கள் ஏற்றுக்கொள்ளவும் மாட்டோம்.
Even today, either government, if they want, they can stop this overnight. Depends whether the Indian Coast Guard stops it or whether the Sri Lankan Navy stops it.
I think it needs a strategy with multiple approaches that can address this. But I think one crucial thing would be in India to highlight the, destructive nature of bottom trawling itself.
I feel the focus should be much more collaboration between researchers and academics and the fisher people's movements to be able to keep, because political concerns, interests, they tend to change, both on the Sri Lankan side and on the Indian side. But to keep this issue alive, there needs to be much more collaboration between academics, researchers, intellectuals, and the fisher movements to be able to take this forward in changing the discourse.
According to the SSF guidelines 5.12, states should strive to restore access to traditional fishing grounds and coastal lands to small-scale fishing communities that have been displaced by natural disasters and or armed conflict, taking into consideration the sustainability of fisheries resources.